Okay, this video is called Exile Writers Are Often the Best. They tell the truth from a unique perspective. And you'll see that if you look back, in the history of literature and philosophy, that a lot of the best writers, they come from these difficult backgrounds. Thucydides was fired from the Athenian army, but he was so fascinated by the war between Sparta and Athens that he wrote the Peloponnesian War about it. It was a magnificent book. And he wrote it knowing that he might not get anything for it, but he wanted to create a masterpiece that would be useful to mankind. Plato himself went through a lot of difficulties. He was a political prisoner. He was a failed playwright, a failed, politician, and he wanted to be a playwright. And so he wrote his philosophic dialogues in the Republic and whatnot. He was also very unhappy about, obviously, Socrates being condemned to die in 399 BC. So he wrote, the Republic in the form of a play, and it was brilliant. I mean, it was an amazing beginning of that type of sophisticated philosophy and writing. Cicero had been exiled in part because of his own fault, the persecution of Catiline without a trial, but he still was the greatest of the Romans. John of was exiled in Patmos when he wrote the book of Revelation. So I show you all this because in the modern world, you're always going to get a mainstream point of view. And I can tell you the mainstream point of view is almost always going to be generic. It's almost always going to be untrue. So if you want to have access to the truth, and you need the truth to make the best informed decisions, you have to learn how to recognize the way that truth comes from a lot of different directions. Okay, and this just goes on. There's multiple examples. Tyndale. They have to go against the establishment, if you will, in order to make great achievements. Dante, exiled from Florence, wrote the Divine Comedy. Machiavelli, exiled from leadership in Florence, wrote The Prince. Tyndale, had to hide from English rulers to translate the Bible, and he really made the translation that was almost the entire what was used to make the King James version subsequent to that. Voltaire, when he was exiled, he wrote English letters, and he learned about Isaac Newton. Tocqueville, when he came to the United States, Tocqueville wrote, "To have liberty, one needs morality. To have morality, one needs faith." And that's pretty well known. Will Durant said the same things. The Voltaire philosophe version of things just doesn't work. Victor Hugo, exiled when he wrote Les Mis. Dostoevsky in prison for many years and had a lot of difficulties before he came back and he wrote Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky says things like, even those who renounce Christianity and criticize it, in their innermost being, they still try to follow the Christian ideal. No one has been able to come up with a higher ideal of man and virtue than the ideal given by Christ. Okay, George Orwell, brilliant genius guy, kind of crazy. He went and fought in the Spanish Civil War and he was wounded, but he saw how evil the communists were. And he's also pushed out of the BBC for, was writing Animal Farm and other things that he was doing, trying to promote the truth. He eventually exiled himself to this little island related to Scotland called the island of Jura, and he wrote 1984 there. Magnificent. Ayn Rand was exiled, her and her whole family, from Russia. She wrote The Fountainhead, Anthem, Atlas Shrugged. She's an incredible genius and a great spokesperson for freedom. And she wrote, the smallest minority is the individual. And basically, if you just have individual rights, you don't need to worry about all this other ethnic group and racial stuff. You just have individual rights and everybody be a lot better off. Solzhenitsyn wrote Gulag Archipelago. He went to concentration camp as an atheist, converted to Christianity because the Christians' behavior was so admirable. Like Dostoevsky, they both feared that Russia either had to return to Christianity or was going to be doomed to serfdom and slavery. Communism is just basically modern slavery. So I say this because, in a sense, the vegan community is like exiled from conventional medicine. Conventional medicine wants nothing to do with the vegan diet, okay? Because if patients were cured with the vegan diet and avoidance of toxins, then where's the money? You make money in conventional medicine by selling drugs, surgery devices, expensive diagnostic tests, and all that. So in a sense, if you look at all the history of some of these, the most well-known vegans and some of the other ones, you will see that is quite often the case. So I just say this because a lot of times people say to me something, well, what about what this authority said or this authority said? And I can tell you, look at McDougall. He's from Podunk, okay? How come McDougall's not from Harvard and the chief of internal medicine at Harvard? Because he's not welcome there, okay? Why don't they call him and say, hey, everybody knows you're a great health doctor, nutrition doctor. Why don't you come and be the chief at Harvard? They'll say, no, get the heck out of here. At his hospitals, they wouldn't even send him a single patient. T. Colin Campbell figured out all the problems with animal protein. Did they say, oh, now we want to make you chief of the department and promote you? They said no, they tried to fire him. It was only his tenure that saved him from being fired. Caldwell Esselstyn figures out how to cure coronary artery disease at the Cleveland Clinic, the big cardiac center. Do they promote him, make him, high up in the ranking system in the cardiology department? No, they tell him to get lost. They wouldn't even let him see a patient there until he had to do legal maneuvers in order to be allowed to see patients there. I can assure you, no one's inviting me anywhere to talk about all my knowledge about vegan diet. Tons of doctors will come up to me and say, oh, it's so wonderful, I know so much, I'm the smartest doctor they ever met in their life, all kinds of nice things to me personally. But they'll never invite me to speak. They'll never promote this at a university hospital. No way. No way, Jose. Okay, none of the Hispanic medical groups want me teaching their students or even teaching them anything. Okay, what I'm trying to say is the truth is not welcome. Only a smart person who wants it can seek it out and find it. And so what I'm trying to say is give exiles the benefit of the doubt. If you go to these other video channels, like Rumble, BitChute, you will have a chance on a lot of subjects to hear a perspective that you can't hear elsewhere. And what I've also noticed is most Americans, in my experience, where both parents are from the United States and the kid grew up and lived only in the United States and doesn't have a close connection to their previous cultural background, they tend to be very narrow in their thinking. They just walk outside and they think everything is the way it is because that's just the way it is and it has to be this way. Whereas somebody who's lived in another country, was exiled for a while, they can really see things from a different perspective and thus, be more objective, more observant. So anyways, I think that's all part of useful because I think people are going to have to seek out the truth and want it and protect it, if you will, or they're not going to get it. And it's disappearing kind of fast, unfortunately.